Good evening, everybody. We're going to get started.
Talk about recycle.
That's it.
Thank you, Evan. Welcome to the North Fair Oaks Community Council meeting for the month of November 2018. Mitzi, if you could please do roll call.
Of course. Chair Everardo Rodriguez.
Here.
Vice Chair Beatriz Cerrillo.
Here.
Councilmember Rosario Gonzalez.
Here.
Councilmember Linda Lopez.
Here.
Councilmember Rosaura Lopez. Councilmember Blair Whitney.
Present.
Councilmember Jennifer Reese.
Here.
Youth member Francis Santo.
Here.
And alternate youth member Esmeralda Rosal.
Here.
Thank you, Mitzi. I should say that Councilmember Rosaura Lopez, she contacted me. She's ill tonight, so she couldn't join us. And next, we'll have public comment. Anyone may speak up to 2 minutes on any topic not on the agenda tonight. If you decide to do so, please fill out a speaker slip, which will be given to you by the table at the entrance. And the council may not discuss or take any action on items not on the agenda tonight. And let me make sure there's... we have Rafael Lavendaño from the Signage Youth Center.
Hello, Council.
Hello.
All right, I'm here with the Bulldog Riders, Siena Youth Center. They're going to speak after. They also have public comment. They're a little nervous, so. I just wanted to first and foremost say that some events that are happening at Siena, we have a really cool Dia de la Rama happening on Thursday, December 14th. You're all invited. They're going to be celebrating music, culture, the day before Dia de Guadalupe in our garden. So I wanted to let you all know about that. We also have really exciting news where we're doing a ribbon cutting of our new Casa de Sobrado 46 unit apartment complex. So I invited all of you. You should have gotten an email, and we hope to see you there. It's a really big deal, and we look forward to celebrating with you. And last but not least, I wanted to bring up something that's finally coming up into your consideration, which is a crosswalk from Siena Youth Center to St. Leo's. That is something that we've been working really hard on for almost 2 years, and we're working on with the county to get that going. So please, if you can do anything, try your best to push that forward, because a lot of our youth are having a hard time crossing the street, especially with the light difference that's happening. It will really help us out. So I want to thank District 4, Irving Torres, for passing that along to the county. Really appreciate that. So those are all my comments for today.
Come on, guys, don't be nervous.
Say hi.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Elvis Campos, and I am a part of the Trips for Kid Bulldog Riders of the Siena Youth Center. I would like to inform you that we are having a pancake sale in order to fundraise for a trip to New York City. In New York City, we will be talking about what we do at Siena Youth Center. Yes.
Hi, I'm Martin. The Pancake Sale will be going to be December 8th in Siena Youth Center from 8 to 1. Another thing is how we are going to have another event December 16th in Siena Youth Center, and we will sell brunch. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope to see you.
Thank you.
Really quickly, the Bulldog Riders, because of all your efforts and your recommendations to do the bike rodeos for the past 5 years, they got invited to the National Youth Bike Conference in New York City in February on President's Day weekend. And we just wanted to thank you and invite you to all these events for us. And yeah, just to celebrate the fact that youth advocacy is happening in North America.
Congratulations. Thank you.
I'm sorry, through the chair. Raphael,
Yes,
we
of
didn't
course.
get the date for the pancake.
Yeah,
When's the pancake thing?
December 8th from.
Oh,
The first one is going to be on December 8th
December.
from 8 to 1. And the second one is going to be December 16th from 8 to 1.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. And I understand that was Martin Cardoso and Elvis Campos. Is that correct? Or is this different public comment? Martin Cardoso? Ah, okay.
Martin.
All right.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. I think the others are related. Okay, moving on with item number 3 in the agenda, a recommendation regarding an off-street parking exception pursuant to Section 6117 of San Mateo County zoning regulations to allow a driveway width of 12 feet where 15 feet is required, and 5 uncovered parking spaces where 7 parking spaces are required for an addition to an existing hardware store located at 2557 El Camino Real in unincorporated North Fair Oaks in San Mateo County. There will be a presentation on this by Laura Richstone, who's a planner.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Laura, and I am the planner associated with this application, and I will be presenting it to the council this evening. As the chair said, it's a parking exception to allow 5 parking spaces where otherwise 7 would be required, and to allow a 12-foot driveway where otherwise a 15-foot wide driveway is required. The subject parcel is located at 2557 El Camino and is home to the Dependable Lock and Hardware store. This is a close-up vicinity map of the parcel in the store. You can see that 2 buildings currently exist on the site. The site is between the red building and the white building. So 2 buildings exist on the site. The building on the left is the hardware store, and then the white building next to it is a 680 square foot accessory building. The applicant is proposing to demolish the 680 square foot accessory building. They're proposing to add about 1,400 square feet to the existing store and to create a 5-space surface parking lot in the rear of the parcel, where currently there's only 2 parking spaces. The addition of the new retail space is what's triggering this application. Per our parking regulations, retail stores such as this one require 1 parking space per each 160 square feet of gross retail area or showroom area. So with a proposed retail area of a total of 1,184 square feet, the hardware store needs 7 parking spaces. Due to the small size of the lot, which we'll get to, the applicant is requesting the exception to waive those 2 parking spaces. And they're asking for an exception to have a 12-foot driveway, wide driveway, where 15 feet is required. So here are some pictures of the front of the hardware store. The hardware store fronts El Camino and is located near the intersection of Northumberland and El Camino. As you can see from the pictures, the existing accessory building is to the right of the store. And here is a photo of just the rear of the store. And you can see the small parking lot in the back. That will be where the new parking lot will be. Here are some site plans. They're kind of hard to see, but they're also in the staff report that was given to you guys in the photo attachments. On the right is the existing floor plan for the hardware store and accessory building. And on the left is the current proposal. It's kind of busy, but I'll explain it. Basically, the new proposal is they're going to demolish the existing structure on the right and then just bump out the existing store and add about 360 square feet of retail space. There we go. So this is the proposal. So the existing building currently has a mezzanine level, and the proposal proposes to add ground floor and then a second mezzanine level in the rear. Yeah. So here are some elevations of what they are proposing. So a front and a side elevation. The front elevation is what you would see driving down El Camino, and then the side is what you would see on either side. So the existing and proposed site plans give you a good idea of what's happening. As I said, they're going to demolish that building to the right of the existing building, and they're going to expand the footprint of the hardware store to the right, and they're also proposing to create a 5-spot parking lot where 2 spots currently are. So in this proposal, additionally, you can see the driveway. They're keeping the driveway the way it is. They're just asking that they can keep it the way it is without having to expand the width of it. So this area of North Fair Oaks, as you all know, was recently rezoned from general commercial to a commercial mixed use in late December 2017. Because the building permit and planning permit were submitted prior to the rezoning, the application is going to be assessed under the old zoning, the old C2 zoning, instead of the new commercial mixed use zoning. And then compliance with the old C2 zoning conformance or regulations is in the table below. They're not changing the maximum height of the building. It's staying the way it is. They're just matching the existing height. There will be increased lot coverage, but it doesn't exceed the maximum. And there will be the front setback of the building won't change, nor will the rear setback. So there was one public comment received earlier this evening in response to this project. The comment was by a representative of the neighbor, the red building right there. And I believe the neighbor is concerned that patrons from the hardware store would park in their parking lot, which is, you can see the blacktop in the back. And they're also concerned that the removal of the fence will encourage that parking lot to spill over into their parking area. From my understanding, the fence is staying there. They're not planning to remove it. However, these are legitimate concerns, so the planning department has the ability to condition the project to maintain the existing fence and separation so parking won't spill over into the neighboring parking lot. In addition, we can have signage at the hardware store, please park here, don't park in our neighbors' lots, be respectful. So those are some solutions to that comment. So that's the end of my presentation. Oh, excuse me. So I asked that the council provide comments to planning staff on whether you conclude that the off-street parking findings can be made. The required finding is that the establishment, maintenance, and/or conducting of the off-street parking facility is as nearly in compliance with parking regulations as reasonably possible. I'm here for questions, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Laura. If there are any questions from council members, please go ahead. Feel free to reach to the closest mic.
So across the street, I've seen some retail businesses open up, and like there's a sofa store across from that Chinese place, and they don't have any parking. They didn't add any parking. They just, one store closed, another one opened. This is all like kind of grandfathered, and I guess it's being triggered because.
So I'm not quite sure about what stores you're talking about, and
It's like Center Street, the light to get into the Target parking lot. There's whatever.
Okay.
There's lots of businesses that don't seem to provide parking, like just right here on Middlefield, you know.
So your question is, why do they not have to provide parking, but this
Yeah, is
person
it
does?
all grandfathered? Where
So sometimes, depending on the situation, it might be grandfathered in. But in this situation, once you're expanding the use, once you're making the retail larger, we relook at your parking. So you can exist with substandard parking levels the way you are in perpetuity, essentially. But when you add more retail, when you intensify the use, then we relook at your compliance. So that's what's triggering this. I'm not sure the situation for the other ones, so I can't really comment on those.
Okay, and then I'm going to make a comment that's not a question. I live on Buckingham, which is like 3 or 4 blocks away, so I've biked by this, I've walked by it, I've driven by it. It's good to see a business occupying that because it was something that closed down for a long time, then they reopened it. I hope that they're successful. As far as the fence, it'd be kind of cool if people could walk between lots. You know, they don't need a super high fence that creates this shadowy dark space, but you know, maybe some curbs and chains and stuff. Everyone's rights can be preserved. But I cut between parking lots when I'm walking and biking, and it creates a more walkable, friendly space with good sight lines and good lighting out there. So I have no objection as it's presented if, you know, the county staff are satisfied.
Thank you.
Thanks, Blair. Linda?
Yeah, is the concern about the keeping the fence up, is that based on the fact that customers had been using the parking lot next door?
I don't believe
What's
so.
it based on?
I think the concern is that the 2 parking lots currently abut one another, only separated by that fence. And I think the concern is that larger stores mean more customers, and if the owner of this property were to remove that fence, the customers would just spill over into that adjacent parking lot. So I think the owner of the adjacent property just wants to preserve their parking for their customers only and want to ensure that the spillover won't happen.
Can you go back to the screenshot of, it shows the proposed, no, it's a real picture.
Oh, okay.
It's an aerial real picture. It shows the, there it is.
Yeah.
So is there a fence now
Yeah, so.
between the business, the restaurant and that little
Yes, I will point out.
house? Okay,
So there's a fence right here.
okay.
The black one.
Oh, it goes all the way. Oh, God. And so that's going to stay?
From my knowledge, yes.
Oh, okay.
So that fence is a division of
It
the lots?
demarks the
It
property
demarks-
lines.
okay,
Most,
great.
yeah,
So
basically.
people on bikes can't get through there anyway?
No.
Okay, okay. And I think the businesses that you were speaking about, Blair, I believe that's City of Redwood City.
Because it's on the other side of
Yeah.
El Camino Real.
So that's not even unincorporated county. So who knows what they're doing, right? Anyway. One other question. Is there going to be enough room for the cars to turn around and come out?
Yes, so.
Or are they going to be backing up? Because that is a really
is-
busy
So-
intersection. It's approaching a very busy intersection.
Yes, so we have back out requirements for every parking lot. Let me just take this. So you have to be able to, so it would be like a 2-point turn, but you would be able to back out and then back out or leave with your front going forward. The backup requirements for parking spaces are 24 feet, and the 24 feet is provided here and provided here. So cars have enough maneuverability, you know what I'm trying to say, to make that 2-point turn and exit the parking lot. So there would be no backing out onto El Camino.
And one last question, please. I thought I read 7 required, but yet there's only proposed 5.
Yes.
So where's the other 2?
So that's what the exception is. They're saying we're required 7, but we can only provide 5.
And is there any other place that you can put 2 more spots in that?
No. So what's eating up a spot is this handicap spot. So handicap has to have the accessibility.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And do you know if the nature of this business is only to sell goods, or are they also going to be offering repairs
I do not know.
Okay.
I don't know. I think they do both.
Okay.
I think they both sell and maybe a few small repairs, but I cannot confidently say so.
Mm-hmm. I'm just curious because, in the drawing it shows regular sedan vehicles, but if it is, slightly larger pickups or trucks, that may also have an impact on.
So, fair point. I can tell you that the size of the parking meets required size, so it's not compact, it's regular parking. Yeah.
Okay.
Could they rent out an upstairs studio apartment down the road and, do other mixed use things legally?
Yes, that's part of the commercial mixed use.
I'm sorry, through the chair. I don't know, are we setting up a problem here, not allowing enough backup space?
So it meets the required backup space.
I know, but
I don't
can
think
people do those, what do you call them, 2.5?
2.2.
like it would be a 2-point turn, I think. It looks like it.
Yeah.
Some people find those hard.
You need to
I can
have
tell you it
pickup
was reviewed by
skills.
Public Works, and they didn't have any comments about the parking.
So we need to have council action on this.
I think the neighbors here, if they want to speak.
Oh, yeah. If there's any public comment on this, please.
And I'm not sure if the owner or applicant is here. He's also here. So he might want to speak also.
Through the chair. There's a section for an applicant comment, so that will follow.
Yeah, but there's no public.
Yeah, but I don't see
So he'll ask if he should be right.
public comment section on here. Well, is there any public comment for this specific issue besides the applicant comment? Okay, and is this your slip, sir? Please go ahead if you can come up to the podium. You have 2 minutes.
Is the applicant here? And does the applicant wish to make comment?
It's right there.
Yeah.
Did you wish to make a comment?
You don't have to. It's only if you want to. Okay. All right. So then you'll follow up after this gentleman here. Go ahead, sir. You have 2 minutes.
Hi, I'm helping the owner of the property next door, and she's concerned about noise. There's an apartment. I don't know if it doesn't show it here, but there's an apartment right next to that area, and so if additional cars are coming in, then the noise might be disturbing to them. Also, just to reiterate the other comment that the the planning department had about cars trying to use that parking area. So if usually 7 parking spaces are required, then probably there's a reason for it. I'm guessing it's because there'll be more people coming to use the service area, buying the things at the hardware store, and they'll need someplace to park. And I noticed in front of there is all red zone. There's no parking on the street. And it seems like the closest parking is going to be maybe a half a block away, unless they're going to use that parking area that she has. Also, the second story is going to overlook, I'm not exactly sure if it has windows on one side, but it may be people be overlooking the apartment building, which is close by too, and looking straight into their kitchen and bedrooms. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure if that'll be a problem, because I don't know exactly how that side of the building looks with the windows for the new proposed area. So the owner doesn't really want to have that approved at all. There's probably nothing that can be done to cure those things. So maybe the owner next door is against having this addition made at all. So
Thank you.
I think that's all the comments. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. And just a clarification, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but the requirement of number of spaces is related to the size of the building, correct? Not necessarily the traffic calculated in a business. But correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, the square footage.
It's related to the total gross square footage of the retail
Correct.
area. So corridors, bathrooms don't count towards that gross square footage. Can I respond to some of his comments?
Please do.
Okay. Even though this is assessed under the old regulations, the new regulations, the parking is actually less. They don't have to provide as many parking spaces. So something to consider, just to put that out there. And also the new regulations, the CMU regulations, the commercial mixed use regulations, require 3 stories minimum building. So in that aspect, this property has lower height. It's only 17.5 feet. And looking into the neighbor's property, the second floor is storage. It's not showroom, so minimal people will be up there, from my understanding.
Okay, thank you. So if the applicant has a comment, please come up to the podium.
Were there any more public comments?
Huh?
Are there any more public comments?
Is there any more public comment about this? Did you fill out a slip, ma'am? Rosa, are you Rosa? Please come up to the podium, actually, before we go on with the applicant comment.
But I live right down the street from this, so I'm worried about coming around that corner. When people are parked there, going in for businesses, it's going to be a truck parked there, I'm sure, and I got to literally come out and speed to get onto El Camino. So this is going to be probably a problem for us, because the people that use the parking lot next to him, they don't use this side at all. He blocks it. He puts a van there. You cannot park there at all. Anybody cannot use that driveway, period. They go into the side, which is a lot safer than coming out or into that street. I'm just saying, I think it's dangerous. So, and to me, I usually have to speed up because there's a lot of traffic nowadays. So I don't know how that's going to work. How many accidents is it going to cause? People coming in and out of there. When they can use the parking lot in the mall, actually, I say. There shouldn't be any parking. There should be mall parking. We have the malls.
Thank you for your comment. If the applicant can now come up.
Okay, thank you very much. The plan originally, when we draw the plan, and for the planning department, when they require that turnaround for the cars in the back, as you see the second building, we pulled it in so it's enough room to car maneuver in the back and get out from the parking lot. And second things, our neighbor was mentioning about the parking, which is that building is rented as a restaurant, right? Is that the building you are owner? The restaurant? Right. So that they have more customers than we do. Their cars are coming and parking in front of our parking, and every day I have to go and ask them to move it. So we never park in their parking lot. Never, ever. And our cars are either parked next to our building right now, the front, or they go park to the shopping mall. Because your building's parking is all the way in the back. To go there, they have to go around it. And our customer never parked over there. Because you were mentioning about it, actually we are getting more parking from your building than they are getting our customers. So that's not true. And also we are not planning to move the fence. And I've been trying to contact you, and I asked your guy over there, the owner of the restaurant, to contact you, and he said he told you never contact me, because I was trying to contact you because the fence is right now is falling apart. I'm trying to fix it, and you never reach out to me. And I've been waiting and waiting. It's been 2 years. I moved there 3 years ago. And so saying that is not true. I mean, our customer never use your parking. And another thing is, right now, I mean, that first building, before I moved there, we remodeled that also. And with one parking spot, everything was signed off, we moved in. But right now, even we are trying to provide it, more parking space, whatever it's being asked to us, we try to, accommodate to make it. And as far as the neighbor parking, and no one is going to park in the streets because we are trying to provide, and our business is not like a regular hardware store. We are like a custom hardware store. It's like specialty. And we don't get customers like every minute over there. My customers, they usually call, have an appointment, or, one or two people just drive by and come in. Because we don't get like people coming in and out. It's not like a regular Ace hardware store. So welcome to walk into my store and see it. So you'll see, or stay over there all day, see how many car parks in our spot.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your comment. So again, like I said, this is an item that requires action from council. So I can entertain an action if a council member has one for this item.
What exactly was the motion posed?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Blair.
I got to try to figure out the correct motion to make to be affirmative. So I move that we concur that the planning staff finding is acceptable.
I would move to provide a recommendation to planning staff on whether the council concludes the required finding for the off-street parking exception can be made.
Oh, okay.
I would simply.
So I move to recommend that they did the best that they could with the lot that they had, and that we recommend approval.
Right. So formally, it would be you would make a motion to provide a recommendation to planning staff that the required finding for the off-street parking exception can be made. That the establishment, maintenance, and/or conduction of the off-street parking facilities as proposed are as nearly in compliance with the requirements set forth in the county zoning regulations section 6119 parking as are reasonably possible, period.
I move as read by the county council.
Okay. We can accept Blair's proposal for the interim. And do I have any second for his motion?
I second it.
I have a second. We're going to take vote individually so that it can get counted. So if we can start from Blair's side, we'll just go to the left.
Aye.
Aye.
I'll abstain.
Aye. Oh, I'm sorry.
Aye.
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 Looks like the motion will pass. Is that correct, Mitzi?
Yes, correct.
And again, it's a motion to provide a recommendation to the planning staff that the council concludes the required finding for the off-street parking exception can be made, that the establishment, maintenance, and/or conduction of the off-street parking facilities as proposed are as nearly in compliance with the requirements set forth in the county zoning regulations, section 6119, parking, close paren, as are reasonably possible, period.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'll include it. Yeah.
Okay, I'll just step out. They can explain why I'm not here.
We'll move on to next item, number 4 in the agenda. Is a recommendation regarding a use permit pursuant to section 6398.2 of San Mateo County zoning regulations to allow off-site parking through a shared parking arrangement with 2 nearby properties to meet the parking regulations triggered by the remodel and expansion of the Chantilly 2 restaurant located at 3001 El Camino Real. We'll have a presentation by Lisa Ausaza, who's the Deputy Director of Planning Department.
And thank you, and I'm Dave Holbrook.
Okay.
So yes, thank you to Lisa, who was before you on this item on October 25th, when this first came before your council. I've had this since the beginning, but she was kind enough to step in for me. What we have here, I want to remind everybody, we've got copies of the staff report that all of your council members have, as well as a bit of a detailed response to some bullet point items that I'll go over tonight. So when this came to your council on the 25th, we got feedback that there were several critical issues about the opening of the Chantilly restaurant. It's been in operation under a previous operator since the late 90s, and then it was out of operation. The current applicant operator, and I believe Tim Standard is here this evening, representing ECR Partners. So on October 25th, there were concerns about the accuracy of the numbers, as well as the locations and the time available for what is essentially a use permit to allow shared and off-site parking. This has been updated. This is reflects all accurate numbers. And one of the other things besides a parking plan and the route of valet parking, there were many issues. Your council directed us to schedule a meeting with the Selby Park neighborhood, who had submitted a letter that we have, it's in the staff report, and that we also responded to. We met with them on November 15th. Kent Lansky was there. There were several other people there. Thank you, Linda, for being there as well, representing your council. And we had a very productive meeting. By that time, what we had for everybody to review was a parking plan that Chantilly had submitted that started getting into how the service was going to be provided. They had a contract with a valet service provider. We had nailed down and confirmed the numbers that were in a little bit of disarray at the October 25th meeting. And then what I want to do is just go over with you you see, there's the Chantilly restaurant. They essentially have 3 leases with 3 different entities. Mr. Paolino also owns this property, but as you know, K&L Wine Merchants has their retail store right here. There is a lease that we have that provides reserve capacity, as you see here on this graphic, for some parking spots back here and then several others here for a total of 29. Next door is the off-site shared parking number 2. That's owned by K&L Wine Merchants, and they have a total of 30 spaces that, again, through lease, they've made available to Chantilly. And then the Polyclean parking lot, which was a concern relative to how valet service would get there and not impact the Selby Park neighborhood, about 750 feet away. They've got 16 spaces that, by a lease, they've got an agreement with Chantilly to provide at certain hours. What I want to do is I just want to go and summarize what occurred, what kind of consensus we reached at the meeting that we had at your direction on November 15th. These are not only the points that we covered, but they pick up all of the items that are also included in tonight's staff report. And again, copies of this with some more narrative are located on the back table. But just going through these, the first thing we wanted to confirm, and that we did with the Selby Park group, is we confirmed the parking numbers and the times. We worked diligently with Tim Stannard of Chantilly, emailing back and forth with a representative from K&L Wine Merchants so that we could keep sending them this graphic that you saw, as well as a table that's in your staff report for the hourly availability, so that everybody was nodding their heads, yeah, that's what we mean, that's what our leases represent. So that was a critical thing. An issue that came up that we spoke about was adequate employee parking. The employee parking is staggered. There's a number of people who show up for an early morning cleaning shift. They're generally gone by the early afternoon. You then have cooks and you have dishwashers and you have food servers who are kind of coming in staggered into the early afternoon, and they're there until the restaurant's closing. What's critical is that it's staggered. And going back to this, what happens is there is some reserved capacity for employees in this primary parking lot during the day. But the other thing that also came up that Chantilly was certainly willing to participate with is getting bike racks into the rear parking lot off the alley, and communicating with employees about the parking limitations. Not all of them drive, some of them do, but also making sure that employees, upon hiring them and working with them, are aware that Chantilly can provide subsidized bus transit passes, so that whether they, if they have to take the bus, they can get there. There is, like I said, parking during the day, and in some cases, employees ride bikes. The third item that came up from Mr. Stannard, the patron turnover and the use of Polyclean. So the way the restaurant works, as it was explained to us and the Selby Park neighborhood group, they have 129 seats. They would typically, and Mr. Stannard can step in and provide more information, but they would typically never even double that capacity in the course of a single night, not even on a busy night. They tend to get their greatest income of patrons 6:30 to 7 o'clock. And based on his experience with valet parking, and they would have 3 to 4 drivers working at a time, and with the directions provided to the valet service through the contract, communication, how the cars will be efficiently parked at the, on the lots that they have the contracts with. And his thought was the parking at the Polyclean parking lot, which actually takes the greatest amount of travel with the valet service providers, will not always be necessary. And remember, we've got essentially, we've got 75 spaces provided for entirely through lease agreements and through the shared parking agreements. The zoning requires 40, which is based on the square footage of the restaurant, of the entire restaurant building. So in terms of the valet service, staff believes, and I think that the Selby Park neighborhood was in agreement that they would have enough parking, and even when the polyclean lot is required to traverse over in that direction. Another thing is the second one, or the next one down, valet route to polyclean. It came up when polyclean cleaners, which is way down on El Camino Real, is used. We want to make sure that the valet parkers don't travel through the Selby Park neighborhood to get there. And the directed route of travel, just so you can see, and there's the alley, and what we were talking about at the community meeting on the 15th, they would pick up at a specific pickup spot for the valet parking. They would go down here, they would go through the alley, they would exit at 5th. And granted, we realize there's traffic at 5th Avenue, especially during the commute hours. Maybe a little bit different on Saturdays and Sundays, but there's certainly traffic. Whether they make a left turn or can cross safely and then get back into the area behind Chavez Market and enter the polyclean parking lot from the back. They would then, when they pick up the cars, to pick up the patrons at the end of the evening, they would just go straight here and back to Chantilly. So that was a route that seemed reasonable, especially in the hands of what was going to be mandatory valet parking. The other thing that came up is passenger loading zones. There is a loading zone currently right here, and so what came up as a way to effectively get people to drive, drop off their cars, and know how to do that, and there's a couple of points coming up that we'll get to that, is they can, there's a requirement to have a Chantilly apply to the Department of Public Works with a proposal to extend the loading zone a little bit closer to the alley and get as much use out of this as possible. Again, people would drop off their cars, 3 and 4 valet drivers. They would take the cars and they would turn right on the alley, and they'd be heading to wherever they needed to park the cars, whether they were parking cars here, there, or in extreme cases way over at Polyclean. There's also a proposal that came up which would be part of the same plan that Chantilly would submit to Public Works, and it was getting a loading zone on El Camino Real. That's a little dicier because it's regulated by Caltran. And, but the way that works, and this is how it would be written up as a condition, is when Chantilly presents the proposal to Public Works for the extending the passenger loading zone on East Selby Lane, they would also show what they want to do in front of the restaurant on El Camino Real. What Public Works will do is they can certainly make a decision on their own, being the county for East Selby. They will make a decision and pass on the application to Caltrans relative to a loading zone on El Camino Real. We heard from the community that there can be issues with the kind of traffic and the speed of traffic along El Camino, and wanting to be careful about too long of a queue of patrons who are waiting for valets to park up their cars, pick them up and take them and park them. But the El Camino Real was at least an added option that we thought we should require the applicant to apply for. So not necessarily mandatory, but we do want them to submit that to Public Works and see what we can get as an additional opportunity to get some easy valet service. Another thing that came up was alerting patrons to limited parking and valet service. So what Chantilly has agreed to do is they'll be informing both on their website and through their reservation service to patrons that valet parking, number one, is mandatory, they provide it, and that there will also be signage so that people will know to where to drop off their car in the most efficient manner, have their cars parked safely, and then called back up when they're ready to pick them up. So the valet parking with signage would go a long ways to ensuring that the communication between the restaurant and the patrons, that people are informed up front that parking is very limited in this neighborhood, and the valet parking services is the way that cars need to be parked. What we also talked about was the signage. What you're going to find in your staff report, I didn't have it here just for brevity, but on page 3 of the staff report, and we kind of quickly sketched what some of the language might be in some signage. I want to go back to this. There's an opportunity. Imagine people are coming to this restaurant. They get some communication and disclosure over the reservation system from the restaurant themselves. Fine. But some signage would really be helpful as people drive to the restaurant to know, bring your car over here, you know. So there's an opportunity on private property, thus on the Paolino, the Chantilly property, either here or in the alleyway, or not in the alleyway, but in the parking lot in the back that Paolino owns, to provide 1 or 2 signs that would really help patrons to know and to understand where to drop off cars, so that they can efficiently have the valet service get those things parked. What it says on page 3 of the report, we came up with some quick language, and we would certainly want to have the language specifically reviewed both by Chantilly, by K&L wine merchants, by representatives of the Selby Park neighborhood, to be installed on the restaurant property. And it would say to our Chantilly patrons, all parking is restricted from 5 p.m. onward, and to be provided by free valet parking, no neighborhood parking, please. And it's just a way to enforce that communication so that we don't have residents meandering and looking for parking down the streets in this neighborhood. We also have owner-county agreement. So this is discussed in the staff report. It's mandated by the NMU zoning regulations when you apply for a use permit, and one of the findings is that an owner county agreement is drafted. This is not something that's recorded, but we will do this, and we will review this with all parties. And essentially what a county agreement, there's some language within the staff report this evening that speaks to what this agreement requires. And what it essentially says is all of the off-site shared parking that you have by lease has to be maintained. Any changes by any of those parties has to come in, it has to be reviewed, and any changes that would result in any reduction in parking availability, even if it's on the polyclean lot that they only use 2 nights a week. But any changes need to be brought to our attention. If an applicant through this county agreement were to ignore that or not make the changes to everybody's satisfaction, then that can be a cause for either reducing seating, but it can be a cause for revocation of this use permit, whereby we go to the Planning Commission and we would seek to revoke it. So it's a serious, and it's a very different and new agreement requirement that's been put into the zoning regulations around parking that we've never had before. It would be signed by all parties, by Chantilly, by the county, and by K&L Wine Merchants representative, as well as the Polyclean owner. Finally, neighborhood questions, concerns during operation. If the restaurant opens, Mr. Standard offered, which we thought was great, because when we look in these types of scenarios, the most important thing that a neighborhood can do is have a direct line to somebody. Tim has offered to have his cell phone available so that any time that neighbors see something or have a concern, they can do two things. They can call him and they call the county so that we can make a record of it and so that we can work with the restaurant, bring in the neighborhood for issues where necessary, and get things resolved earlier than later. The last thing that we have is the 6-month administrative review. We don't always do this, but this is a pretty good candidate for it. A lot of the concerns that everybody had was, in fact, how do we know that the valet parking service is going to work just the way they say it's going to work, for instance? Well, Chantilly is very willing, and we would have required after 6 months, we'll have collected any comments. Maybe there has been some communication, but in any event, we will come back in 6 months. We will come back to this council and review their performance about everything that you will see in the requirements and the conditions of approval. I might add, in the staff report tonight, you don't have the conditions of approval yet. The next stage for this, depending upon your recommendation this evening, is on December 20th, we'll go to the zoning hearing officer. At that point, we'll have all the conditions written that take off from all the bullet points you see here and all the agreements. So the 6-month administrative review will also include input and coordination with the Selby Park neighborhood, because we want to have it be very inclusive as to how have they been doing in terms of the performance. How can they fine-tune it, which is understandable with any off-site shared parking agreement, and certainly with the ebb and flow of a restaurant and how it works, it's critical as well. So those are the primary points that we discussed at the meeting on the 15th, including where staff is going relative to putting together conditions of approval if we go to the zoning hearing officer in December. I know, as in the last case you just heard, there are findings. The findings for this use permit include the single finding you just made for the previous item. They're on page 9 of your staff report, but there's several findings that go to several of the things we've talked about, including the requirement for the owner-county agreement. And some of the requirements will have to be met prior to a building permit being finalized. Some of the requirements will need to be met before the doors open. And so members of your council will also, I'll make sure that we've worked with Mitzi to get you copies of that staff report that's going to the actual zoning hearing officer for consideration of the use permit. And that brings us to the request for your recommendation, which gets inserted directly into that staff report so that the zoning hearing officer understands what the council's recommendation was, as well as any additional comments or anything we need to add relative to the conditions of approval. So that concludes my presentation. And the applicant is here this evening, Tim.
Thanks very much, Mr. Holbrook, for your presentation. If council members have any questions, I'll ask that you be brief, please, because we are running out of time for this particular item. And also, I'd like to say that council member Linda Lopez had to recuse herself from this specific item. She's a resident of the surrounding area. And if there are any questions from council members, please go ahead.
Is there anything about Uber, Lyft, pickup, drop-off in that passenger? Because I didn't see all that.
You know, we asked Tim about that at the community meeting. He thought that their patron clientele probably was using more private cars than Uber or Lyft. They also operate a restaurant up in San Francisco where it's very different up there for obvious reasons. A lot of people use that kind of service. That said, you might expect that to come up. And the perfect place, whether there's a loading zone there or not, especially in the evening, is an Uber driver would likely drop them off right in front at the front door facing El Camino Real. I mean, if we've all seen the Uber Lyft drivers, it's a very fast transaction. I mean, they drop them off and they're gone. It certainly is probably, I just don't know how prevalent it will be.
If I can hear briefly your comments about the outcome of the community meeting that took place in on November 15th.
So it was very positive. They agreed. You'll see in the staff report where we had written a extensive response to the Selby Park neighborhood letter, which included several questions as well as some subsequent emails.
Right.
The meeting started out and certainly ended in the conclusion that we want the restaurant to succeed. We just don't want any adverse impacts to this neighborhood relative to parking or travel. And I believe that through the bullet points that I showed you, we came to that conclusion, but again, with a lot of conditions to ensure that it happens.
Great, thank you. And we will hear from some of the residents in that surrounding area in short.
If the applicant has any comments, I would return to him.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that there aren't any other questions from council members. Okay. Yeah, let me see. So if the applicant has any comments? No? Okay, thank you. We will proceed with public comment then, and we will have Mr. Louis Padlino. Is that correct? Good evening, sir. You have 2 minutes.
Good evening. Thank you. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. Our family has owned this property since the 40s. We've had a number of restaurants there, starting out back in mid-40s, and progressing to what Tim and his company is planning to present to the community. And I believe that he is doing an admirable job in trying to accommodate the requests of the neighbors and the council, and we certainly hope that you reach a conclusive agreement that it is satisfactory for them and for yourselves. Thank you.
Thanks very much for your comment. Next, we have, is it Mr. Richard Francis? Lenny, I'm sorry, it's a little bit hard to read the handwriting.
It's hard to pronounce.
You can state your name.
Thank you. My name is Richard Franceschini, and I'm here along with my uncle Lou Pellino and my sister and my aunt. We are the owners of Chantilly. And I just wanted to, first of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. And secondly, to give you a little bit of information about how we arrived at working with Tim and the Bacchus Group. We had several applications for this restaurant space, and per my uncle's comments, this is a bit of a legacy for our family, this property, and we take it very seriously. We had several applicants. We narrowed it down to 3, and the reason that we chose Tim and his group was because of their level of professionalism, the types of establishments that they currently own and operate, and we felt that of all the people that we spoke to, he would take the best care of the legacy of this property moving forward. And we're very much in favor of his tenancy and here to support him 100%. And we also hope that you will look kindly on his proposals. I feel that he has gone out of his way to be supportive of the requirements of the neighborhood. And based on the due diligence that we have done, it's been proven to us that in his other establishments, he has gone above and beyond not only excellence in service and exemplary reputation of his restaurants, but I think working with the communities which he operates currently. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you for your comment. Next, we have Mr. Todd Sacker.
Good evening. I am one of the co-owners of K&L Wine Merchants, and we've operated the business at the location for a little over 41 years. We've seen a couple of restaurants prior to Tim and his group coming in. And I would say outside of the neighborhood, we would probably be the folks that would be most concerned about a parking situation at that location. And after meeting with Tim and having several conversations with him, we're absolutely convinced that he will be a great neighbor and will be a great asset to the community. And for you folks that live in the neighborhood, you'll be able to walk to a great restaurant. So we fully endorse the issuance of a use permit.
Thanks very much for your comment. And I believe that concludes public comment. If there's anyone else, please speak. Otherwise, this is an item that requires council action tonight. So
Through the chair.
I will, yeah?
I can say roll call in order to take the vote. So
Yeah, we will. But if I can entertain a motion from council member?
And just to be clear, the motion would be a motion to recommend or to not recommend.
Correct.
A use permit pursuant to section 6398.2 of San Mateo County's zoning regulations to allow off-site parking through a shared parking arrangement with two nearby properties to meet the parking regulations triggered by the remodel and expansion of the Chantilly 2 restaurant located at 3001 El Camino Real in the unincorporated North Fair Oaks area of San Mateo County. So again, it's a motion to recommend or to not recommend. the issuance
Correct.
of the permit.
Yeah. So I will entertain a motion from any council members.
I'll make the motion to recommend the consideration of the use permit pursuant to section 6398.2 of San Mateo County zoning regulations to allow off-site parking through a shared parking arrangement with two nearby properties to meet the parking regulations triggered by the remodel and expansion of the Chantilly 2 restaurant located at 3001 El Camino Real in the unincorporated North Fair Oaks area of San Mateo County.
Thank you, Rosario. Do I get a second? Here, get a second. We're going to take a vote individually again, starting...
Through the chair.
Yes?
I will take the roll call, and
Oh,
then
okay.
members will vote.
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Chair Everardo Rodriguez,
Aye.
Vice Chair Beatriz Cerrillo,
Aye.
Councilmember Rosario Gonzalez,
Aye.
Councilmember Blair Whitney,
Yes.
Councilmember Jennifer Reese,
Aye.
Youth Member Francis Santos.
Aye.
It sounds like the motion is passing, and I would like to add a final comment about this issue, specifically to the applicant. I hope that he understands that this whole ordeal is painful for everybody. Parking is one of the most contentious issues that we deal with in this community, and we are happy that you were persistent. We welcome you, and we wish you the best. And now we'll go on with item number 5 in the agenda. It'll be a presentation regarding neighborhood parking permit program. A presentation by Joel Okoko, who's the Deputy Director of Public Works.
Thank you and good evening. So this is a good segue into parking. So what we've been talking for a while is we're looking at the county level to develop a residential permit parking program countywide. We don't have anything formal at this point in time. And we wanted to reach out to the community. Oops. Whoops. There we go. We wanted to reach out to the community and get some feedback. We approached the council and discussed this, this very topic a while ago. What we did since that time is we refined what we would look at as a program. We also did a little bit more research, so we reached out to up to 46 local entities to see what kind of local parking programs they had. So we wanted to model our program after something that's pretty typical within the community. And I apologize, there's an error in the slide. It says West Selby Park. It's the East Selby Park neighborhood. So my apologies for that. But a little bit of background is when we brought this to the council previously, part of the feedback we got was that the council wanted to make sure that we reached out locally to the neighborhoods, and specifically the neighborhoods who had expressed an interest in this program, and that was the East Selby Park neighborhood. So to that end, in advance of this meeting, we have contacted through Nextdoor or notified the East Selby Park neighborhood of the coming meeting and the fact that this was on the agenda. So again, what we're looking to do here tonight is just get some additional feedback so that we can do maybe some last minute refining on what this program might look like. Eventually, once a program is adopted and in place, it would be implemented on a first come, first served basis, so it wouldn't necessarily be piloted anywhere. But understanding that there's a neighborhood that has expressed an interest, certainly, and is following this conversation, they could be among the first neighborhoods to put in an application. So there are multiple components that we want to highlight tonight. Essentially, there are specific time restrictions. There are variables with respect to what the duration of the permit would be, the cost of the permits, the number of permits per household, guest passes, eligibility for the program in the first place, and how the program gets administered. So among all these variables, again, we looked at 46 agencies, 26 which are in California. There are a lot of variabilities within the programs. In the next few slides, we'll try to highlight kind of the general guidelines that we saw elsewhere. So this is on time restrictions. What we are seeing among the various programs that we surveyed is that a majority of the time restrictions were on basically during weekdays, Monday through Fridays. There was an element that extended to Saturday in some cases. And they were also generally during business hours. Our proposal would be generally in alignment with what we're seeing there. We're proposing restrictions basically Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. With respect to the length of the permit, here we're looking to do it a little bit outside of the majority consensus of the programs that were there. Generally speaking, we saw 1- and 2-year programs. The majority of the programs were essentially annual permits. But we think that we can just kind of, basically less process, everything can be smoothed out. Might be a little bit better if we go with a 2-year program. Permit costs. So generally what we saw is a pretty good range of costs. If you're among the programs, we saw costs ranging from free in some cases up to $200. I believe in some really urban areas like San Francisco, I believe the permits are more expensive than that even. But we're looking at generally kind of a middle of the road. Our proposal is for permits to be $75 per year. Generally, when we looked at these programs, roughly 50% of the programs had costs in that range. About 40% of the programs were actually a little bit less expensive than that. So that's what we're showing on this slide. 40% of the programs were $30 or less. Roughly 50% of the programs were within the $30 to $100 range, and we identified from the surveys that we did about 12% of the programs more expensive than that. Permits per household. This was an area where what we saw was not a real clear-cut consensus on the various programs. So there were a variety. Generally, the programs were 1 to 4 permits, and generally in these other programs, we saw roughly equivalent percentages for 2, 3, or 4 permits. Our proposal would be for 2 permits per household. This would be an area where, again, I think the feedback that we receive would be important. I think one of the things that we're concerned about is if parking is already at a premium, then basically allowing 3 and 4 permits for a single household, that continues the challenges that those neighborhoods are currently seeing. So we thought 2 might be the right number, but we're certainly looking for input on that. Oh, did you get that picture, Blair? Sure. Then guest passes. Again, some variability here, but a vast majority of the programs had 1 to 3 guest passes per year. Our proposal is for 6 guest passes per year. There could be additional guest passes, but the 6 guest passes would basically be at no additional cost. Additional guest passes, those would be at a cost, which we haven't really determined what that would be, but I think we'd look at relatively minor cost for additional permits, or passes, I'm sorry. And then eligibility is, this is going to be obviously the deciding factor on whether or not a program such as this can be implemented in a community. So we're looking at this as a residential-only program. There are exceptions, and those are for construction service vehicles. One thing I didn't talk about, and I think it's not necessarily highlighted here, is that even with a residential permit parking program, what we envision with the program is that you could have non-residents parking in the neighborhood. They would just be capped at a 2-hour limit. So residents could park there all day. Non-residents can park there for 2 hours. So you wouldn't have cars from adjacent businesses coming there. But in fact, if you as a property owner, it would make it easier for if you as a property owner have a company coming in to do work on your house. A lot of this probably can be accommodated within that 2-hour window. In order to qualify, what we saw as typical and believe makes sense is that there be a minimum length to the proposal, so at least 1 block or at least 1,000 feet, or no less than a combination of those 2. That a parking analysis would be part of this program to see if a neighborhood qualifies. And so we are not looking at implementing a residential permit parking program where there is plenty of parking to go around. We're really focused on neighborhoods where there's a shortage of parking. And so the idea behind this program or this component of eligibility is that to qualify, we would do independent surveys of a community or neighborhood that applies, and we would essentially find the neighborhood application to be eligible if at least 80% of the available parking spaces were occupied when we do the survey. There could be some variability as to when the survey would occur, but kind of the standard practice is that the survey would occur on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, and that it would generally occur kind of mid-morning or mid-afternoon. For a neighborhood to place an application, we would need to get at least 50% of that neighborhood to go ahead and essentially put in a petition or to respond to the application. And we would need at least 67% of the folks who have given us feedback with respect to the proposal to be in support of it. Lastly, we do want to make sure that the proposal isn't causing a problem necessarily for the Sheriff's Department, the Fire Department, or that the Community Council has a specific concern. So for the program to be eligible, we'd have to sign off on the technical side of it, and we'd want to make sure that the emergency service providers and the homeowners associations, if there is one in the area, that they do sign on, or in this case, the Community Council. Finally, in the process, we see this similar to how other programs have been approached, and that would involve a neighborhood coordinator. Once we receive the application from the neighborhood coordinator, then we would go ahead and make sure that the emergency service providers are okay with the proposal. If that were the case, we would then do the occupancy survey. If the neighborhood does qualify after all these steps, then essentially what we would do is go forward to the Board of Supervisors. Any parking restriction requires Board of Supervisors action, so that would just be the next step logically in the process. And from there, an ordinance is passed, and we could go ahead and install the signage and issue the permits. So this right here, we're just trying to kind of summarize the kind of an outline of the process from beginning to end. So as far as implementation of a residential permit parking program. So we're here to talk to you, to receive feedback from you, to receive feedback from the neighbors tonight with respect to the elements of our proposal. It would be our intent to take those comments, take those back to the office. We can then at that point in time discuss if we'd make any minor modifications to the program that we're proposing. And from there, we'd finalize a parking permit policy document, notify community groups of the modified proposal, solicit any additional feedback, and then finally go to the Board of Supervisors and ask for adoption of the policy. And with that, that's generally the plan and outline of the program. I think from here we'd like to hear if the council has some additional questions or if they have some comments on the policies, which we can take back. And of course, the neighboring community, we'd like to hear from them as well.
Thanks very much for your presentation, Mr. Lococo. If council members have questions, please go ahead and be brief.
Yes, I do. Under the eligibility section, I'd like for you to expand on the county performance of the parking analysis. So what does that entail, that parking analysis?
Yeah, so basically a standard parking spot is considered to be 20 feet in length. And so when we'd go out there, we'd identify essentially between the driveways, how many 20-foot long segments do you have? So for example, if the length between the driveways, two sets of driveways was 84 feet, we would say that there are 4 essentially parking spots within that space. So when we do, essentially, and those are standard spots. So actually the way it would play out is there probably is some opportunity if the cars are a little smaller, if you have a compact vehicle, for a 5th car to be in that spot. So that would just kind of build up the likelihood that a particular neighborhood would meet the eligibility requirements, because then between those driveways, essentially it would be 125% parked out.
Any other questions from council members?
Through the chair. So are you still viewing this as a pilot project? And Oh.
Go ahead. No, we're not viewing this as a pilot project. What we're looking to do is just to establish a program that can be essentially a county-wide program. And then individually, neighborhoods could come to us and ask to be included in the program.
Have other neighborhoods also requested a parking permit? Or just from the several individuals from Selby Park?
We've had about 4 neighborhoods that have expressed an interest in some kind of a residential permit program of some kind.
Okay.
1 on the coast and 3 on the Bayside. So that's kind of the feedback that we've received thus far. I think on the Bayside we had the East Selby Park neighborhood, we had Menlo Oaks, and I think we had one other one in North Fair Oaks.
I guess my concern, Joe, is on the process outline that following that the 5th bullet point, it seems that should happen first before any finalized document is presented. But you have it after. And I'm assuming this is the order of your process. I'm looking under the process outline.
Yeah, you're looking at item 5? That's just essentially.
No, go to the next one.
Next slide.
Okay, I'm
Next
sorry.
one.
Yeah.
There we go.
Number
Okay.
5.
So prior to finalizing it, in my opinion, soliciting additional community group feedback should happen before you finalize the document. And I say that because when this was first brought to our attention, it was presented as a possible pilot project for the Selby Park area. And at that time and as of today, not everyone has been informed of what that might look like, and not everyone has had the opportunity to give the input. Many people are concerned about the cost, the enforcement, so there's a lot of questions around it. So I don't feel that, how can we take care of that?
Yeah, so really the 3rd bullet point is a little misleading. The intent of the 3rd bullet point is for Public Works to go back, essentially make some minor tweaking to the program. So develop what we believe is the recommendation. And then we'd continue to solicit additional input. We'd basically then notify community groups, this is the proposal that we intend to move forward with.
Okay.
Please let us know if you have any additional comments. So there would be another round of iterations before a final program would be presented to the board. So we probably should have worded that a little bit differently. It's basically bullet point number 3 is really that Public Works would, from this process right here, tonight's process and the input that we're getting, look to kind of wrap up what we believe are the recommendations that we want to go to the board with.
Okay.
So it would be a preliminary policy in essence.
That's correct.
Okay.
How is Public Works going to solicit the input?
So we haven't necessarily identified exactly what that would look like, but among the things that obviously are kind of key in our solicitation process, I believe, would be to reach out to the various councils that exist within the county. So that would be your council, but there are other councils that we're not necessarily talking to at this point yet. So we'd want to also reach out to the Mid-Coast Community Council, as an example. We'd reach out to up in Broadmoor Village. They have their own homeowners associations. We'd reach out to them. We'd also probably do a fairly extensive solicitation through next door notifications. And I think, again, we haven't really talked about exactly what this might look like. But we may also I think for sure we'd go ahead and add some language on our webpage, just kind of announcing that this process is there and rough timing of it, and the fact that we're accepting comments.
Okay. And then, and I know I have to be real brief. Comment about enforcement. Is that going to be another $40 ticket, like a street sweeper citation type of ticket? Do you know yet, or what that looks like?
Yeah, I probably ought to have looked that up.
Okay.
I believe there's a standard, yeah, I think the dollar amount is kind of a standardized dollar amount, and it may very well, probably on that order.
Okay. And then one other last comment. Under time restrictions, I don't know if that 8 to 6 is going to work, because most of the people parking in the neighborhood get in there after 6, and then they leave for work before 8. So this doesn't really,
well,
I don't know if this is, I just had, it just kind of popped out on the time.
Yeah, I think.
Something to look at.
I think that really is kind of the standard type of program that we're seeing.
Okay.
We're not set on exactly what the hours are, so I think we can certainly have some flexibility there. 8 to 6 is kind of what we looked at as far as other programs, and what we kind of identified maybe as a kind of a starting point on the conversation. But definitely, when we talk about areas where we have a little bit more flexibility, that's one that we're certainly willing to chat a little bit more about hours that make sense.
Okay. Thank you, Joe.
You're welcome.
Any final questions from council members? Go ahead.
I just like the idea of the lowest permit fee possible, because I know a lot of times if people are apartment dwellers, the costs could be prohibitive if you add another $150 fee versus a $50 fee. And in my neighborhood, the rubbish recycling thing, is there anything where they like actually paint the curb and say on Tuesdays, this spot is just for recycling containers? Or I'm just throwing that out there because there's like a little battle of who reserves spots with the containers, and everyone's moving everyone else's containers, and
yeah.
I know it's petty, but you know.
Yeah, and I'm not sure the way around that. So my understanding is that essentially those containers, they can be on the street legally a day before the pickup and a day after the pickup. So potentially if somebody's, maybe if they've rolled out their containers, they're not home, you know, those containers could be on the street for up to 3 days. And obviously those have a significant impact on parking. But I think by default, you know, that's really where they need to be picked up with kind of the modern garbage truck. So I'm not quite sure what the solution to that is, although I certainly recognize that as an issue that's fairly common, especially in areas that are pretty heavily congested from a parking perspective.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation and for answering all the questions. We only have 2 public comments about this issue. One is from Rose. Oh, go ahead, ma'am. I'm sorry, I can't understand I think I'll mispronounce your last name.
Peters.
What's your last name?
Peters, sorry.
Thanks.
Go ahead, you have 2 minutes.
I thought it was an ongoing situation here. I saw it on Nextdoor that this was on the agenda, so I came. This is why I'm here anyways, because we do have a parking problem. I live on Northumberland.
Use the microphone. Sorry, can't hear you.
I thought I had a big mouth, sorry. I live on Northumberland, and parking is horrendous. And I think 2 parking spots per person, per house is perfect. You know, I wonder about people living in apartments. Do they move with the pass or leave it to their friends? I don't know how that's going to work, but that's my only issue about it. But other than that, I vote for my neighborhood to be first. So I'm up for that.
Thanks very much for your comment. We have next Ken Maske.
the question for Joe is, can a portion of the neighborhood have restrictions, or is it absolutely that it would have to be all streets in the neighborhood?
Yeah, the idea behind the 1,000 feet or 1 block minimum is that it certainly could be a portion of the neighborhood. What the program would do is, I think we'd only look at essentially a continuous request. So we wouldn't have residential permit parking along 1 block and then a gap and then residential permit parking on the next block. So as long as we're looking at that continuity, the program certainly could be 2 or 3 blocks and not an entire neighborhood. Yeah, so again, our starting point is going to be all residential neighborhoods. And I think where it would make more sense in my mind, in most cases, to have some variability would be in some areas where the uses are mixed on, so for example, in North Fair Oaks, Edison, you have businesses on one side, and you have residential on the other. So I think that's where some differentiation on one side of the street or the other does make some sense. But if with the starting point of just looking at the residential neighborhoods, then I think that's, again, what we think is a logical place to go, is to have uniformity. And our concern there would be in understanding that certainly a hybrid program could work, that if in fact, what we don't want to do is we don't want to really essentially solve the problem on a couple of blocks by pushing it onto some adjacent areas.
Yeah. I'm sorry, but we need to move on to the next item. But this item should be continued for sure. Yeah, this is just the beginning. Yeah. Thanks very much. I'm sorry, Kent. We are rather late, so we're going to try to zip through the next couple of items. The next one, number 6, is a presentation regarding North Fair Oaks garbage rates for 2019, and this is a presentation by Lillian Clark. Yeah, and so given the time constraints, we're going to try to rush through and maybe be as brief as you can. Thank you.
So first off, I'd like to apologize. I have a cold, so there may be times I'm not very clear, so let me know if you can't understand me. So good evening, members of the council, staff, and the community. My name is Lillian Clark, and I'm pleased to be here with you this evening to discuss the proposed 2019 garbage and recycling rates for North Fair Oaks. Uh-oh. I did it, Ivan. I apologize. The county manages 2 garbage and recycling franchise areas. One is North Fair Oaks, which is here. And we have 7 other areas, which we call or refer to as the county franchise area. These 2 franchise areas are part of a joint powers authority called the SBWMA, or South Bay Waste Management Service Area. And SBWMA contracts with Recology for collection and SBR for processing, and the SBWMA owns the Shoreway Environmental Center, which is in San Carlos. So the county's role in the SBWMA is we set our rates annually. We ensure contractor compliance with the franchise agreement. for both of our service areas. We make program recommendations and conduct special events, such as the shredding event we held last summer at the North Fair Oaks Community Center. We manage customer feedback regarding services. We do conduct a survey, and we are one member of a 12-member agency on the SBWMA. And as a member of the SBWMA, each rate year, the SBWMA conducts a process for the services you receive. The contractor conducts an annual audit of revenue and cost for the service areas. And when they conduct this audit, they not only audit what Recology is providing in terms of collection services, they also include the SBR rates, the SBWMA rates. And in the case this year, there's also what has an impact on rates is the fact that we can't sell all our recycling any longer, right? So that has, all those things go into this pie to look at rates. And then the contractors apply their indices, such as CPI and labor and fuel. And then the SBWMA takes this pie, and then they piece the pie back out again to the individual members based on your service levels, basically. And then the county, we conduct an independent analysis of the rate reviews, and we make our own recommendations to our board. So we basically start with the starting point of the SBWMA documents, and then we further analyze the information they've provided us. And then we make a final rate recommendation that gets approved by the board. So the county's review, what we look at in terms of review or our analysis is over a 5-year period. But what I wanted to point out at the beginning of this presentation is right now, the current cost of service based on the SBWMA calculations to provide service for 164-gallon can at the curb is supposed to cost the individual customer $54.28. If we had a 20-gallon cart, you should be paying $46.04 for the 20-gallon cart. Because remember, these rates include all 3 services. It includes your composting cart, your recycling cart, and your garbage cart. And I should point out that we also anticipate a 12% increase for disposal costs in 2021, and the SBWMA is not they haven't finished their negotiations. What that means is currently we take our waste to Ox Mountain. That contract expired. They put out an RFP to look for another contractor to bring our waste to. And of course, they are evaluating the RFP. So we're really not sure what those costs are going to be, but our consultants are pretty, they think the trend is around 12%. And then the other thing that we're anticipating is with the new amended franchise agreement with Recology, we anticipate that there could be a cost increase of 10 to 12% for the new contract. And that would start in 2020. Well, their current contract ends in December of 2020, so that would begin in January. So that would actually have an impact on the 2021 rates. So currently, in the 2000 rates, the overall goal is to align our rates as close as possible to those costs of services. Therefore, the 2019 rate year for North Fair Oaks, we propose the following. We propose an 8% increase for residential dwelling carts, the minimum level of service on the tax roll. So that's your 232s or your 164s. And an 8% increase for 32-gallon commercial carts, which is primarily for the dwellings that are over 4 units. And there are a few businesses that have mandatory service by the health department, and they will be impacted as well because they're on the tax roll. So the garbage rates shown in the table include collection costs for all 3 carts. The rate increase for residential cart service will increase $2.47 per month, or $29.64 annually. This increase is for the minimum level of service for all parcels with dwellings. And the new rates would be effective January 1st, but again, these are not placed on the tax roll until July. So one thing you must also keep in mind when we do these rate increases, we also have to factor in that there's a large percentage of our rates that is not going to change until middle of the year. So we have to bump it up because they're on the tax roll. Now, what does, okay, so what, excuse me. So what do your garbage rates provide? They provide you weekly collection of all 3 carts. Commercial also receives weekly collection, and they receive garbage and recycling services. They don't get the free composting. They have to pay a certain price. Disposal fees and handling costs, again, like I was talking about. Once Recology picks up those carts at the curb, they have to bring it to SBR. There are processing and disposal costs that we incur on that side. You get 2 free on-call bulky waste item collections for residential customers 2 times per year. You get other things that you can put at the curb, like used motor oil, oil filters. This time of year, they do the Christmas tree recycling. They'll pick up your Christmas tree. Once a year, they help support us on the shredding events. And then at Shoreway, you also get recycling drop-off, latex paints. They'll take mattresses for free, cooking and motor oil, electronics. All small appliances can be brought to Shoreway for free. Another service that Recology provides to us, and thankfully so, is picking up illegal dumping that is on the curb. And the majority of the illegal dumping that I have seen in the last 3 months is residents putting out their old couch, their old car seat, their old furniture, and unfortunately, Recology, we asked Recology to pick it up. There were 464 of those. So I'm sure later on in the presentation, Ileana will give you an update on some other things that we're working on, but we're hoping in the new year to reduce that and inform residents we don't want your old couch. Call for your free cleanup. Use your free cleanups. It's in your rates, because what happens is when they go out 464 times to pick up that illegal dumping, it is an added cost to the garbage rates to have Recology pick up those items. And I think that Recology has a great website. You can look on their website. You can find the schedule for when your pickup. You can schedule your 2 free cleanups on their site. They also have an app you can put on your phone. And I brought some copies of their holiday schedule in case any of you forgot about what's going to happen with the next 2 holidays.
Great.
Does anyone have any questions?
Do council members have questions? I don't believe so. So thank you very much.
Thank
Lily.
you, and happy holidays.
Same to you.
Any public comment?
Is there any public comment about this item? I don't believe so. So next we'll have an update regarding community collaboration for children's success. Presentation by Maeve Johnson, who's the community health planner. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. It is getting late, so I will try to be brief.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for the opportunity to present and update this council on the CCCS, or Community Collaboration for Children's Success Initiative. You had an update from my boss, Shireen Malikafzali, back in June. So I'll do just a really quick overview refresher so we're all on the same page about what I'm talking about. And then we have some findings from the process here in North Fair Oaks, Redwood City, and I would love to share those with you. So the initiative is taking place in 4 neighborhoods in the county in high need and high readiness locations. The neighborhoods are North Fair Oaks, Redwood City. It's a neighborhood that kind of crosses the border of the 2 jurisdictions. We're also working in South San Francisco now, and we'll work in East Palo Alto and Daly City in our next phase. We're a multi-agency initiative, so I work for the health system, but we're working with many other agencies in the county, to engage impacted youth and families to ask them what are their barriers to success, what are the strategies that they would like to see us adopt to address those barriers. So we're now in the planning process, working with communities to identify those challenges and the strategies they'd like to see us consider. And we'll move into phase 3 or implementation at the end of the fiscal year in July, and I'll talk a little more about that at the end of the presentation. So again, we're working in high youth need areas. These were identified through a combination of the factors that you see here, but particularly looking at young people in juvenile probation and our youth behavioral health and recovery services clients. So looking at where we have concentrations of those young people. At the same time, we wanted to recognize that there are strong community assets throughout the county, and we looked at where those assets were. We wanted to work in places where we knew there was a strong infrastructure to grow a project or to kind of incubate what will come out of this process. So this is those 4 neighborhoods I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. Well, you can see it. So it's a combination. So the 4 neighborhoods are the highest need combined with the highest readiness. We identified these 4 neighborhoods. So the neighborhoods are actually a smaller geography than the city. We're looking at really a neighborhood. So the analysis honed in on a smaller place, and we're looking at those places as best we can in this initiative. So all of that should be familiar to you. I'll give you a sense of kind of what we've been doing in North Fair Oaks, and Ever and Linda have been active participants, so maybe you can add anything that I forgot. But we have been working here over the last 4 months. We've convened a neighborhood leadership group 3 times, which has been a group of community stakeholders, residents, young people, people who have some affiliation with young people in the area. Also, a lot of service providers, local service providers, bringing that perspective of working with our system-engaged youth and youth who may be at risk of becoming system-engaged youth. We also have worked with community champions, so we have trained neighborhood folks to go out and collect data in the community through surveys and group conversations. We have that data back now, so we're looking at that data, and in neighborhood leadership groups, really looked at what are the assets in this community, more specifically, what are the barriers to success, and what are the strategies that you'd like to see us explore? And in the second photo, you see an exercise where we're doing that. So we asked people to look at this long list of strategies and kind of pick their favorite ones, and then everyone voted for them. Excuse me. So we are working closely with stakeholders in the area. You all should have that list, and this is not necessarily a full list, so if anyone is forgotten, I apologize. But really just to say that we have cast a wide net and are working with as many folks as we can. We have, through our champions, we collected surveys, did small group conversations, and something we call dream walls, which is more of a passive kind of data collection strategy. And I'll also say our champions are we're really kind of our boots on the ground folks who were a really strong connection to the community. They were paid for their time, which we feel really happy to have been able to do. And we heard from about 200 young people in this area, young people and their families, about the assets, needs, and strategies in the community. So what were those things that we heard? I will say before we get into it that it was really broad. So we really struggled with kind of categorizing and understanding the various things. So we put them into categories as best we could. The first is affordability, as you may well know. There was a lot of concern about just being able to stay here, the cost of living, the childcare, and access to kind of a gap between where people were personally in terms of their family economics and the skills and opportunities that they needed for living wage jobs in the area. A second category we're calling resilience building for needs is around kind of this idea that that there are these barriers to young people developing resilience, which is something we know that young people need in order to face challenges that may come up through their lives. And those are things like not enough time with supportive adults. So that really, in many ways, goes back to the first category. Parents have many jobs, people are stretched thin. Something we saw in North Fair Oaks that really surprised us was a fear of sexual assault rose to the top of the concern list. So something we're thinking about, and certainly thinking about strategies to address that. Young youth and parents not knowing their rights, leadership development needs. And then the third category is around services and activities. Young people not having places to go after school or before school. That mental health and substance abuse were not identified early enough in a lot of cases, and that services are difficult to access, especially given the time constraints for families. So we're also looking at the assets that address these needs in the community. We're getting that, as I said, from the impacted communities and community leaders. We're also looking internally at our own services and programs to understand where we may better align those services, as well as we're going to the school district and the cities to see what other supports may address those needs. And we're looking at existing community data. So our community partners have been very helpful in that way. Then when we talk about prioritized strategies, it's another place where we had a really broad field and had to sort of narrow it down. So we have begun to think about the strategies that people are identifying as top strategies in 4 categories, and I'll start at the bottom with protective and healing spaces. That's really addressing this idea that that in many cases there are barriers to seeking support that come even before walking out your door to go see a mental health counselor or get food stamp assistance, and that's having major financial challenges, not feeling safe in the community, these sort of like very basic challenges. The second, and this is really an environmental kind of area or strategy that would affect everyone. So as we go up the pyramid, the strategies affect sort of a more focused group of people. The second tier is around those things that were identified that are address specific needs. So for example, the fear of sexual assault. Do we need to do a bystander intervention training? Do we need to do a consent curriculum in schools? exploring that more deeply. And then the third one, prevention and early intervention, is recognizing that there are places where we can catch young people before they come into our systems. Some key ones that have been identified through our agency partners have been high absences in schools, as well as pregnancy for people on Medi-Cal. So those are some of the places that we're looking, but we'll certainly continue to talk about that. So we're running short of times, and I don't want to keep you all here for all night, but these are some examples of some of the strategies and the kind of locations that they would be housed that are on the table that we're thinking about. So this is from that first bottom rung of protective and healing spaces. This is from that second rung, and this is from the third rung. We're kind of thinking in terms of a promotora type of model of a wraparound services, kind of addressing the whole family. So our strategies, we have narrowed them down with the neighborhood leadership group significantly, and we will continue to do that. And actually, our last neighborhood leadership group meeting is next week on Tuesday, and this is the meeting where we'll be making some, really narrowing down and making some final designations about what is most important and what we want to really prioritize. And ultimately, we will create a community plan for the area that is related to youth success. And implementation, I will say, there's a lack of certainty around this, so we want to be really transparent about that. We will likely contract with a lead entity to implement a plan, if that is the likely scenario. We are looking for funding, so we are going to the Board of Supervisors to ask for funding to implement these 4 plans, and that's an active process. We're looking at private funding and fundraising, and we really know that the vision is very large, that the children's success is a big topic, and that it will really mean long-term commitment and really sticking with the goal. So we're looking ahead to that, and that is the end.
That's a great picture.
I know, isn't it nice?
Yeah, so cute. So cute. Thank you very much for your presentation and for hanging on to this busy agenda. Rather briefly, if there are any burning questions, please do so. Otherwise, I'll encourage you to submit questions via email. They're very responsive, and I'm assuming that they will welcome individual questions.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so then that's it. Thank you.
Okay,
again.
Thank you
very much.
No public comment?
No public comment on this item, and if we can have a brief supervisor's report. I see Irving still hanging in there.
I was preparing to give a 11-minute I have a dream about North Fair Oaks speech, but in the interest of time, I'll keep it brief, council members. County Council, Deputy County Manager, County staff, my name is Irving Torres. I'm a Senior Legislative Aide with Supervisor Warren Slocum. I'm going to be reporting on behalf of the Supervisor tonight. Just a couple of items we just wanted to share with you. Kind of a year in reflection of just all the accomplishments that have been implemented, that have been achieved in North Fair Oaks. So I'm just going to highlight a couple of them. One of them was the ban on flavored tobacco. The other one was the allocation of more than $700,000 for immigration deportation, legal defense funds, the mural project on Middlefield Road. The sheriff's office conducted a number of block parties, the completion of the road repair on 7th Avenue, and then finally, the preservation of over 100 affordable units, which in total, more than 500 North Fair Oaks residents will be continuing to live, play, and raise in their families in North Fair Oaks. I want to commend the North Fair Oaks Community Council, along with the Office of Community Affairs, for all your support. I wanted to just acknowledge that you all made a contribution to that. And just very quickly, just what lies ahead for 2019 is obviously going to be the construction along Middlefield Road, the next phase of Middlefield Junction, which there's going to be some public comments on participation sometime next year, and then the consideration of the rezoning for Phase 2B and 3. And as we head to 2019, I want to share with the council members, especially the youth members, a quote by former President John F. Kennedy. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. So I ask this question to the council members. Ask not what North Fair Oaks can do for you, ask what you can do for North Fair Oaks. And that's all I have to report tonight. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Irving. Any burning questions? Otherwise, thanks very much. Happy holidays.
Thank you, Irving.
And we'll see you next year. If county manager has a report, we'll be grateful for that.
We have a couple of items to report out from last time. There was a question on rodent issues. The Mosquito Vector Control District is the agency or the special district in San Mateo County who not only work to reduce mosquitoes, but address the issue of vectors. I think you have some information regarding those services in the packet handed out to you. Street sweeping signage, the schedule, a copy of the North Fair Oaks street sweeping schedule is available also in your packet. The map includes the frequency, the schedule, and the routes. Illegal dumping, we have the app in your packet. You'll find the information, see it, click, fix it. You can report illegal dumping and graffiti in North Fair Oaks. Also, under the county, there was a question whether or not we had the ordinance in place. There is an ordinance, San Mateo County 3.50.010. A fine of up to $3,000 per item can be imposed on anyone found illegally dumping items in North Fair Oaks or unincorporated area. And the Office of Sustainability has completed a flyer. We will move towards education. So in the coming month, we will mail this brochure out to every resident in North Fair Oaks. And then we will move on. We'll have some discussion about enforcement activity. Online ethics training. Council members, you received today an email regarding completing the online ethics training that's required by all of us. It is due by January 24th. From here until January 24th, if you take a moment to complete it, at the end, you'll be prompted to sign, print out and sign a document. You can send it either electronically to the Community Affairs office, or you can bring it in on January 24th when next we meet. Trash bins, Middlefield Road, we looked into the trash bin question. There is the ability to put more trash bins out. The issue will be the pickup schedule, and we're not sure that it would resolve the issue of the trash. There's also the opportunity to work perhaps like with the Taco Bell, see if they would put more bins around their establishment. Of course, these are all things that then would be a cost that would be incurred by the owner of Taco Bell or the entity that we would request the bins on. So we'll further look at that. There was also the question on Fair Oaks School, the soccer field and the bathroom usage. The field is there. You can make reservations through the Redwood City Rec Center. But the bathrooms, it depends on who rents the space for the soccer field. And Sal put it out, but it is locked down during times when, it's locked during non-usage times. Sal's normally the one who will open it and has the keys, and it's due to liability issues. And I believe that is the county manager's report.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ileana. And I will encourage council members, if you have any reports, you could potentially send them to Mitzi, and she could send it all to us. And that should conclude the meeting. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for your patience.
Thank you, everyone.
We made it.